Hey guys, tonight we're gonna slip into the shadows of the past, but not the cool romantic video game kind of shadows. We're peeling back the myth from one of history's most fantasized professions to look at the grim, dirty, and frankly often pathetic reality of being a medieval assassin. Forget the rooftop leaping, eagle screeching brotherhoods for a moment. Instead, picture damp, rat infested alleyways, questionable employers who wouldn't think twice about betraying you, and a life expectancy that makes being a court food taster look like a retirement plan. The air smells of cheap ale, wood smoke, and paranoia. The dagger under your tunic is probably rusty, and your target is less likely to be waiting for a dramatic monologue and more likely to be surrounded by a dozen very large, very alert men with very pointy halberds. The simple truth is, you probably won't survive this, or at least not long enough to get a pension. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And please, drop a comment with your location and local time. It's always amazing to see where our nightly drifts through history end up. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are not a member of an ancient, honorable creed. You don't have a cool hideout with secret passages and a wise old mentor. You're sitting in the corner of a dingy tavern where the ale is sour and the floor is sticky with things you'd rather not identify. Your current profession, if you can call it that, is unemployed sellsword with a bad reputation. Or perhaps poacher with a knack for silence. Maybe you were a soldier in a forgotten war, good at scouting and even better at slitting sentries' throats. But now you're just another desperate man with skills that don't translate well to peacetime activities like farming or basket weaving. Your resume is less about your qualifications and more about your prior acquittals. This isn't a calling. It's what's left when all the other doors have closed. The faint jingle of your last few coins is a constant, mocking reminder of your predicament. It's on a night like this, when the cold rain is seeping through the cracks in the tavern's wattle and daub walls, that the offer arrives. It doesn't come via a mysterious scroll delivered by a black-feathered crow. It comes in the form of a man whose shoulders are as broad as a barrel, and whose face looks like it lost a fight with a bag of rocks. He slides onto the bench opposite you, his presence sucking the meager warmth out of your corner. He doesn't offer you a drink. There's no HR department for this kind of recruitment. He knows who you are. He knows you were dishonorably discharged from the Baron's Guard. He knows you have a grievance with a certain merchant across town. Or maybe he just knows you look hungry enough and desperate enough to listen. His voice is a low rumble, barely audible over the snores of a drunkard by the hearth. He doesn't talk of justice or balance or saving the world. He talks about a problem, a person who needs to disappear. And he talks about coin, a lot of coin, enough to make you forget the sourness of the ale for a moment at least. This is the reality of your recruitment. It's not a noble summons, it's a grubby, opportunistic transaction. Political murder is, as a grim historical fact, a constant, if unofficial, tool of statecraft and power struggles in this era. When nobles or wealthy merchants want to remove a rival, they don't recruit a hero. They find a disposable instrument. They find you. And this man is the instrument's handler. He lays it out plainly. No one will ever know he spoke to you. If you're caught, you are on your own. You are a lone agent whose existence will be furiously denied. The benefits package, you surmise, does not include dental. It's a tempting offer, mostly because the alternative is starvation or being thrown in a debtor's prison. And sometimes, the recruitment is even more personal. A quirky but effective tidbit of medieval hiring practice for such tasks was to find someone who already hated the target. An aggrieved business partner, a wronged family member, or a disgraced soldier like you. A personal grudge was considered a far more reliable motivator than mere money, which could always be counter-offered. The recruiter might mention your old commanding officer, the one who had you flogged and dismissed over a lie. He hints that this is the very man his patron wants removed. It's not just a job now, it's a chance at revenge. A chance to turn your festering bitterness into cold, hard coin. You find yourself thinking about the legends, the whispers of organized groups of killers. Perhaps you've heard travelers' tales of the Hashashin in the far-off Holy Land. These stories paint them as a terrifying order of devoted, almost supernatural assassins. But historians still argue whether the legendary Assassins of Alamut were a highly organized order of professionally trained killers, or more of a political religious movement that used targeted, high-profile killings as just one of several tactics to exert influence and terrorize their much larger enemies. The man sitting opposite you certainly isn't recruiting you into a mystical brotherhood. He's hiring a thug for a dirty job, plain and simple. You look at his stony face, then at your near-empty coin purse. Your life of so-called freelance risk management hasn't exactly been booming. Every instinct screams that this is a terrible idea, a path that leads to a shallow grave or the end of a rope. The man offering you the job will be the first to sell you out if things go wrong. But then you think of another night spent cold and hungry, another day of being scorned and overlooked. This offer, this dark and dangerous proposition, feels less like a choice and more like an inevitability. It's an offer you can't refuse because you've already run out of refusals. You give a slow, almost imperceptible nod. You'll listen, and just like that, you've taken your first step into a world far harsher and more pathetic than any of the legends ever told. The big man grunts, a sound of satisfaction, and gestures with his head toward the tavern door. There's no more talk. It's time to go. You drain the last vinegary dregs from your wooden cup, the small act feeling strangely final, and follow him out into the slick, rain-soaked alley. The night air is cold, smelling of wet earth and soot. He leads you not towards the opulent manners of the highborn, but deeper into the city's labyrinthine network of narrow, twisting streets, where the upper floors of the timber-framed houses lean in so closely they almost touch, blotting out the sliver of night sky. This part of the city is not on any tourist maps, that's for sure. The meeting location is clearly not a five-star establishment. He brings you to a heavy, iron-studded door at the side of what looks like a spice merchant's warehouse. The air here is thick with the alien scents of faraway lands. Cloves, cinnamon, and something sharp and peppery. A fragrant mask for the dirty business at hand. Inside, you're led past towering stacks of Hessian sacks into a small, windowless back office, lit by a single expensive beeswax candle that gives off a clean, honeyed light. A stark contrast to the tallow stink of the tavern. And there, sitting behind a heavy oak desk, is your patron. He is not what you might expect. He isn't a hulking brute or a shifty-eyed villain. He's a man of middle years, impeccably dressed in a doublet of dark indigo velvet, his hands clean, his nails neatly trimmed. He could be a wealthy merchant, a guildmaster, or a minor nobleman. He radiates an aura of calm authority, and that's far more terrifying than any overt threat. The big man who brought you here melts into the shadows by the door, his job as an intermediary now done. As a historical fact, patrons orchestrating such grim affairs almost always used cutouts and middlemen to maintain plausible deniability. For you to be meeting the principal is a sign of either great urgency or great arrogance on his part. And either way, it's incredibly dangerous for both of you. The patron gestures to a simple stool opposite his grand chair. You sit. He speaks, his voice smooth and measured, without a trace of the street in his accent. He names the target, a rival guildmaster who has been undercutting his trade routes. He details the man's habits, his schedule, the guards he keeps. He speaks of it all as if discussing a particularly tricky bit of accounting. There's no passion, no rage, just the cold logic of removal. Then he names your price. It's even more than the big man mentioned. A sum that makes your heart beat a little faster. It's enough to buy a small farm, to start a new life, to be someone else, somewhere else. But then comes the part you knew was coming, the terms and conditions, or rather, the lack thereof. There is no contract, he says, a thin smile playing on his lips. No written agreement. I have never met you. You have never met me. If you are caught, if you are taken alive and questioned, he lets the sentence hang in the air. The implication is heavy and solid as the desk between you. He's promising you a fortune for success and absolute abandonment for failure. There will be no glowing letter of recommendation from him to the city executioner. You understand the grim truth of this arrangement. Confessions extracted from captured assassins were a notorious source of political maneuvering. Historians still argue whether confessions extracted under torture, which often named prominent and powerful patrons, are reliable historical sources of who was truly responsible, or if they simply reflect what the torturers and their political masters wanted to hear. Either way, your patron is ensuring that if you are taken, whatever you say will simply be the ravings of a desperate, low-born killer trying to save his own skin by implicating an important man. Your word against his? It's not a fair fight. He pushes a small, heavy purse across the desk. An advance. Good faith money. To aid in your preparations, he says smoothly. He then produces a silver coin. With a surprising strength in his clean hands, he snaps it in two. Keep this half, he instructs, placing one jagged piece on the desk. Present the other half to my associate upon completion of the task to receive the balance. This is a quirky, but not uncommon method of sealing a clandestine deal. The two halves of the broken token serve as a physical, undeniable proof of identity and success, far safer than using names or written words. It's a contract written in metal, its terms sealed by a fracture. No need to get the lawyers involved. You look at the man, at the jagged piece of silver, at the purse fat with the down payment. You are a tool, a weapon to be used, and then, ideally, discarded. If you succeed, can you even trust him to pay the rest? Or will he send another desperate man, perhaps with the other half of this very coin, to silence you and tie up the last loose end? The paranoia is already starting to sink its teeth into you, but your choices are thin on the ground. The path back to the tavern, to hunger and obscurity, seems even less appealing now that the scent of real money is in the air. With a slow, deliberate movement, you reach out and take the purse. Then, you pick up the jagged half of the silver coin. It's cold against your skin. The patron gives a small, satisfied nod. The audience is over. The big man silently reappears and gestures you out. As you step back into the damp, dark warehouse, the scent of cloves and cinnamon now seems to have a coppery, metallic undertone. The deal is done. You have your target, your advance, and a broken piece of silver, and you are utterly, terrifyingly on your own. Back in the relative anonymity of a cheap flophouse room, the kind that rents by the hour and doesn't ask questions, you empty the patron's purse onto the lumpy straw mattress. The silver and occasional gold coins make a soft, satisfying clink. It's more money than you've had at one time in years. Beside the pile of currency lies the jagged half of the broken token, its sharp edge a cold, silver promise. Now that the deal is sealed, the planning begins. And the first part of any plan is assembling the necessary equipment. Your mind, perhaps influenced by heroic ballads or exaggerated tavern tales, might momentarily entertain fantasies of specialized, master-crafted tools. You check your pockets. No exploding pocket watches or shoes with a hidden blade. What a surprise. Your budget and the grim reality of your situation call for something far more mundane. Your first stop is the smithy, but not the main one in the town square where they shoe the lord's destriers and forge fine swords. You go to a smaller, dirtier forge in a back alley, where the smith has a reputation for asking few questions, and for sharpening blades that have seen questionable work. You need a dagger. This is the cornerstone of your toolkit. Not a fancy, jewel-encrusted affair, but a brutally practical piece of steel. As a historical fact, daggers were ubiquitous in the Middle Ages, carried by nearly everyone, making them a common and concealable weapon. You might choose a rondelle dagger with its distinctive circular handguard and long, stiff, needle-like point. It's not designed for slashing, but for stabbing, specifically for punching through heavy cloth, leather jerkins, or finding the gaps in a coat of mail. It's a specialized tool for a very specific and very violent purpose. You test its weight, the feel of the simple wooden grip in your palm. It feels cold, solid, and unforgiving. Next, you consider other options. A length of good, strong cord, easily looped and hidden up a sleeve, can serve as a garrote for a silent approach from behind, in theory. In practice, it's more likely to result in a desperate, flailing struggle. You might also acquire a small leather pouch filled with caltrops. This quirky tidbit of medieval warfare is a simple but nasty tool. A cluster of 4 iron spikes, arranged so that one point is always facing up when thrown on the ground. A handful scattered behind you in a dark corridor could be brutally effective at slowing down any pursuers, crippling them or their horses. It's a low-tech but surprisingly useful gadget for planning an escape. Then you contemplate the most infamous tool of the assassin's trade: poison. It's the stuff of whispered court intrigues and paranoid royal nightmares. But for a man in your position, it's an incredibly risky gamble. Where do you get it? Not from any respectable apothecary. You have to seek out a back alley herbalist or a so-called wise woman who deals in things both medicinal and malevolent. The transaction is tense and secretive. You might ask for arsenic, the classic, hard-to-detect inheritance powder, or perhaps finely ground nightshade or hemlock. The purveyor will sell it to you with a knowing look and no satisfaction guarantee. Results may vary. Side effects might include your own agonizing death if you handle it improperly or get a taste of it by mistake. And that's the main problem. How do you know it's potent enough? How do you administer it to a guarded, paranoid target? Poisoning a man's wine at a feast sounds easy, but it means getting access to the kitchen or the cellars, bypassing food tasters, and doing it all unnoticed. It's a delicate operation requiring a level of access and subtlety that you simply don't have. Historians still argue whether poisoning was a common and effective tool of assassination, or if its prevalence is an exaggeration in chronicles, a reflection of the deep-seated fear of this unmanly and insidious form of murder that could strike anyone, anywhere, without the courtesy of a drawn sword. You decide to procure a small vial of something dark and viscous, just in case, but you don't trust it. It's a weapon of last resort, as likely to complicate things as it is to succeed. So you stand in your grimy room and take stock of your arsenal. A stiff, pointed dagger, a length of rope, a pouch of iron spikes, a vial of questionable poison. There are no throwing knives balanced for perfect flight, no hidden mechanisms, no smoke bombs. Your toolkit is that of a desperate predator, not a master craftsman. Everything is simple, functional, and must be concealable beneath the folds of your worn tunic and cloak. You slide the dagger into a new leather sheath, tucking it into the small of your back. It opens letters, it opens arteries. Very versatile. The weight of these mundane items feels far heavier than their physical mass. They are the tools that will seal your fate, one way or another. This isn't the beginning of a legend. It's the quiet, grim preparation for a violent, dirty job. With your grim toolkit acquired, you now face the true challenge, the part of the job that requires more than just a sharp blade or a strong nerve. The plan. You have a name and a location, but beyond that, you have nothing. There are no architectural blueprints to steal, no guard patrol schedules posted on a public notice board. You can't exactly check the Yelp reviews for Lord Valerius's manor. 1 star. Guards are lazy. Side entrance poorly secured. Your work must begin with the slow, painstaking, and deeply unreliable process of gathering intelligence. This is a game of whispers, shadows, and patience, fueled by the advance your patron provided. Your first step is observation. You spend days just watching. You find a perch, the shadowy doorway of a building opposite, a hayloft with a convenient crack in the wall, or you simply loiter in the street, affecting the look of a beggar or a man waiting for a day's labor. From dawn until dusk, you watch the target's manner. You note the number of guards, the times they change shifts. You watch the servants coming and going, the cook's boy heading to the market, the maids shaking out rugs, the stable hands exercising the horses. You're looking for patterns, for rhythm, for anything that looks like a weakness. It's incredibly tedious work. Hours crawl by with nothing to show for it but a numb backside and the suspicious glare of a passing city watchman. When direct observation yields little, you must immerse yourself in the local ecosystem of gossip. The mainstream historical fact is that in an age before newspapers or instant communication, the tavern was the nerve center of information. It was here that news, rumors, and secrets were exchanged over flagons of ale. You find the tavern favored by your target's household staff. You sit in a dark corner, nursing your drink, your ears open. You listen to the guards complain about their captain, the kitchen maids gossip about their mistress, and the stable boys brag about the fine horses in their care. Every snippet is a potential puzzle piece. This is where your patron's coin comes in handy. You buy a round for a few off-duty guards, sharing a laugh and a story, all the while gently steering the conversation. A fine manor Lord Valerius keeps, you might say casually. Must be a fortress. An arrogant guard, puffed up with ale and self-importance, might boast, "Aye, a fortress." Though the west wall is a bit of a joke since the last rains, and the new lad on the night watch falls asleep if you look at him funny. This is gold, but it's also just as likely to be a drunken lie. You have to sift through the boasting and the grievances to find the hard pebbles of truth. Turns out, the price of a potential state secret is about 3 cups of cheap wine and a convincing compliment about a guard's new boots. You also learn to seek out less obvious sources. You might strike up a conversation with one of the laundresses down by the river. This quirky but effective tidbit of espionage relied on the fact that laundresses had intimate access to a household. They knew who was having an affair, who was ill, who had received a secret visitor. They overheard conversations while collecting linens from bedchambers and dining halls. A few coins and a sympathetic ear could yield information a guard would never know, like which window latch is broken or that the Lord snores so loudly no one would hear a cat burgling his chambers. You take this jumble of half-truths, rumors, and scraps of information back to your miserable room. By candlelight, you might scratch a crude map into the dirt floor or onto a precious piece of parchment. Here's the main gate. The stable boy said a delivery of wine arrives every 3rd day near dusk, a possible entry point. The laundress mentioned a small postern gate near the kitchens that is sometimes left unbolted. The guard boasted about the lazy watchman on the west wall. Your plan begins to form, a fragile thing built entirely on the words of unreliable people. So, the stable boy says the secret entrance is behind the 3rd barrel. Or was it the 3rd stable boy behind the 1st barrel? The details are dangerously fuzzy. This stage highlights a core difficulty of your profession. Historians still argue whether the apparent security of medieval castles and manors, with their high walls and visible guards, was a genuine, formidable defense, or largely a psychological one, easily bypassed by someone with enough patience and intimate knowledge of the household's human element. Its routines, its vices, its lazy watchmen. You're betting everything on the latter. You're betting that the fortress is only as strong as the most corruptible, drunk, or inattentive person working within it. After days, maybe even weeks of this slow, dangerous work, you have what passes for a plan. It's a flimsy thing, full of what-ifs and assumptions. You have a route, a time, and a method. But you are keenly aware that one piece of bad information, one sober guard, one servant who recognized your face from the tavern, could bring the entire thing crashing down. The intelligence gathering is over. Now comes the infinitely more dangerous part, putting it all into action. The night you've chosen is starless, with a low-hanging mist that promises to swallow sound and shroud movement. It's as good as you're going to get. You've gone over the flimsy plan in your mind 100 times, tracing the crude map on your wall with a finger until the image is burned into your memory. With your dagger cold against your back and the small pouch of caltrops weighing down your belt, you slip out of your room and into the sleeping city. Infiltration is not a glorious burst of action. It's a slow, terrifying creep, and you're keenly aware that there are no grappling hooks or convenient zip lines in your inventory. Getting to the manor is the easy part. You move like a wraith through the empty streets, a shadow amongst shadows, every sense screaming with alertness. A distant dog's bark makes you freeze. The clatter of a loose roof tile makes your heart leap into your throat. You finally reach the high stone walls of the target's compound, a looming, dark mass that seems to drink the mist. As a historical fact, even a wealthy merchant's fortified manor, let alone a nobleman's keep, was a serious defensive structure, designed to repel casual attacks or bands of robbers. For a single person to get inside is a formidable challenge. Your intel, for what it's worth, suggested a low point in the west wall, partially hidden by a thicket of overgrown trees. You find it, the stone slick with damp. The architect clearly wasn't thinking about future freelance infiltration specialists when he designed this wall. There are precious few handholds or footholds. The climb is a brutal, clumsy affair. Your fingers, numb with cold, scrape against the rough stone, searching for purchase. Your worn leather boots struggle to find a grip. Every scrape of leather, every dislodged pebble that skitters down the wall, sounds like a thunderclap in the oppressive quiet. You press yourself flat against the cold, damp stone, holding your breath, listening for any sign you've been heard. Nothing. You haul yourself over the top, muscles screaming in protest, and drop heavily into the garden on the other side. You land, not with a silent thud, but in a sprawling, painful heap right in the middle of a dense, thorny bush. A lovely bed of welcome to our castle thorns. Just what my knees needed. This quirky tidbit of defensive landscaping was a real practice. Some lords deliberately planted gorse, hawthorn, or other painful, entangling shrubs at the base of their walls as a low-tech deterrent. You spend a few agonizing moments untangling yourself, trying not to curse aloud as thorns rip at your tunic and skin. Once free, you're in the heart of the beast. The manor house looms before you, a few of its windows glowing faintly with candlelight. The air in the garden smells of damp earth, wet leaves, and the sweet scent of night-blooming flowers. A peaceful aroma that feels utterly at odds with your violent purpose. You move from the shadow of one manicured hedge to the next, your dagger now loose in its sheath. This is when you hear it. The low, guttural growl of a dog, followed by a sharp bark. Your blood runs cold. Historians still argue whether household dogs, particularly the large mastiff types often kept in noble houses, were primarily for hunting and status, or if they were an intentionally bred and highly effective component of the manor's security system. Right now, as you freeze behind a statue of some forgotten ancestor, you're willing to testify that they are extremely effective. You wait, motionless for what feels like an eternity, until a muffled command from a guard silences the animal. You continue your slow, agonizing crawl towards the rear of the keep, towards the small postern gate near the kitchens that the laundress told you about. This is the linchpin of your entire plan. If she was wrong, or if the gate is bolted tonight, you're trapped in the garden with the dogs and the guards. You reach the small, unassuming wooden door, hidden in deep shadow. Your hand, slick with a mixture of rain and nervous sweat, closes around the simple iron latch. You apply the slightest pressure. It doesn't move. Panic seizes you for a second. Was the intel bad? Did someone lock it? You apply a firmer, more deliberate pressure, and this time, with a faint, almost inaudible click, the latch gives way. The door creaks open just enough for you to slip through. You're inside. The air is warm and smells of old cooking, wood smoke and sleeping humanity. It's pitch black, and you must rely on your memory of the layout you pieced together from gossip. You hear the slow, rhythmic pacing of a guard's footsteps down a nearby hall. The night watchman is supposed to be asleep, you recall the drunken guard boasting. Of course, tonight he seems to have discovered a newfound passion for diligent, energetic pacing. You press yourself into a small alcove, your heart hammering against your ribs, waiting for him to pass. Getting into the keep, you realize, was brutally difficult, but it was just the first step. Now you have to navigate the sleeping household, find your target's chamber, and do the deed, all without making a single mistake. The real infiltration has only just begun. The guard's footsteps recede down the stone corridor, each heavy tread a hammer blow against the silence. You exhale a breath you didn't realize you were holding. Your body pressed so tightly into the shadowed alcove that you can feel the individual weave of the tapestry against your cheek. It smells of dust, damp wool, and generations of spiders. You've made it inside, but now the real test of patience begins. Getting close to a high-value paranoid target isn't a swift business. It's a deadly waiting game played in the dark, where the slightest misstep means failure and a brutal, messy end. You slip out of the alcove and begin your slow, methodical search. The ground floor of the manor is a ghost of its daytime self. The great hall, where feasts and audiences are held, is a vast cavern of shadows, the embers in the massive hearth glowing like a single baleful eye. The long trestle tables are bare, save for a few stray crumbs for the mice. Finding the master bedroom in the dark is a challenge. There are no helpful "You are here" maps on the tapestries, and every corridor looks maddeningly similar. Your crude map, memorized back in your room, gives you a general direction: up. The Lord's private chambers are almost always on the upper floors, for status and for security. The main staircase is your enemy. It's made of heavy, dark wood, and it has been designed, either by intention or by age, to announce every visitor. Each step you take, no matter how carefully you place your weight, elicits a groan of protest from the wood. This floor was clearly designed by the Loud Floorboard Company, a limited. Excellent craftsmanship. You freeze after every step, listening, your hand resting on the hilt of your dagger. You hear the distant, muffled snores of servants from their quarters, the scuttling of a mouse in the walls, the mournful sigh of the wind outside. Every sound is magnified, every silence pregnant with threat. Finally, you reach the upper corridor. The air here feels different, more still, more private. The doors are of a finer quality, the tapestries on the walls more intricate. This is where the family sleeps. You begin the painstaking process of listening at each door, your ear pressed against the cold wood. You hear the soft breathing of a sleeping child from one room, a loud snore from another. You move on. The historical fact is that the master's bedchamber, often called the solar, was the most secure room in any non-military residence. It was a private office, a reception room for important guests, and a final refuge. Getting into it was never meant to be easy. You find the door you believe to be your target's. It's at the end of the hall, its oak timbers bound with heavy iron. There's a complex lock on the outside, but you already know from your intel that a man of his stature and paranoia would have it barred from within. You press your ear to the wood and listen. You hear the slow, deep breathing of one person, but also a second, slightly more ragged breath. A guard. You risk a glance through the keyhole, a sliver of vision into the candlelit room. You can see your target, Lord Valerius, asleep in a large, four-poster bed. And there, on a smaller, low bed on the floor between the door and his master, is a bodyguard, fast asleep. This is a classic, if frustrating, security measure. The bodyguard might be sleeping on a truckle bed, a quirky but common piece of furniture designed to be rolled under the master's larger bed during the day. His job is to be an instant, armed obstruction to anyone who manages to get through the door. This particular guard appears to be guarding his master's dreams, mostly by having very loud ones of his own. Still, He is an obstacle you hadn't fully counted on. Your simple plan of slipping in and getting the job done is now a complex two-person problem. The door is barred. The target is not alone. Every new layer of security frays your nerves. You retreat into the shadows of a recessed window opposite the door, your mind racing. Do you try to create a diversion? Do you wait until the guard has to relieve himself, if he even does so before morning? Do you abandon the plan and try another night? Every option is fraught with risk. This is the reality of stalking a paranoid target. They have spent a lifetime and a fortune making sure people like you can't get to them. Historians still argue whether personal bodyguards in the medieval period were genuinely effective deterrents against skilled and determined assassins, or if their presence was more a status symbol, often compromised by the same complacency or corruption that afflicted the rest of the household staff. This one seems complacent enough in his sleep, but his mere presence means you can't simply force the door. You are now truly playing a waiting game, huddled in the dark, your muscles cramping, your senses stretched to their breaking point. You have found your target. He's just a few yards away, but he might as well be on the moon. Hours pass in the cold, dark corridor. You cycle through moments of intense, heart-pounding alertness and waves of bone-deep weariness. Your plan to slip in and do the deed while the target sleeps is dead. The barred door and the bodyguard have seen to that. Your only hope is to wait for a mistake, a moment of weakness. And then it comes. A stirring from within the room, a groan, and the sound of the heavy bar being lifted from the door. The bodyguard, it seems, needs to use the chamber pot tucked away in a corner of the corridor. For a few precious seconds, the door will be unbarred. This is your only chance. As the door creaks open and the sleepy, disheveled guard steps out, you move. You don't have time for a clever plan. You lunge from the shadows, one hand clamping over his mouth, the other driving your rondel dagger hard into his side, finding the gap between his ribs. It's not a silent, clean motion like in the stories. It's a messy, grunting struggle. The guard's eyes go wide with shock and pain. He thrashes, his boots scraping loudly on the stone floor. He makes a desperate, gurgling sound against your palm before slumping, a dead weight in your arms. You gently lower him to the floor, your own breath coming in ragged gasps. The first obstacle is down, but the silence is shattered. From inside the room, a sharp, fearful voice cries out, "Who's there? Gerard, is that you?" Your target is awake. The game is up. You burst into the room. Lord Valerius is already scrambling out of his massive bed, his eyes wide with terror in the flickering candlelight. He's not a helpless old man. He's reaching for a dagger of his own, left on the bedside table for just this eventuality. He doesn't seem to be following the script. The part where he lies still and accepts his fate with dignity seems to have been edited out. He screams, a full-throated roar for help that seems to shake the very walls. "Guards! To me! Murder!" What follows is not an elegant duel or a ballet of blades. It's a nasty, brutish, and loud brawl. You lunge, he parries clumsily, knocking over the bedside table with a crash of pottery and metal. He's shouting. You're grunting with effort, the two of you wrestling in the middle of the room. This is the reality of your craft. A desperate, ugly struggle against a man fighting for his life. He is not a passive target. He is a cornered animal. You slip on a rug, nearly losing your footing. He swings his dagger wildly, slicing a long, hot gash across your forearm. You ignore the pain, fueled by adrenaline, and close the distance, crashing him back against the heavy oak bed frame. The historical records of assassinations are often bloody, violent affairs. The murder of someone like Thomas Becket in his own cathedral was a frantic, public butchery, not a single silent stroke. Your work here is no different, just more private and pathetic. You finally managed to trap his weapon arm, using your weight to pin him. You raise your own dagger, his eyes wide with the final primal terror of a dying man. lock onto yours. The killing itself is a grim, repetitive physical act. It is not one clean stab. It's a flurry of desperate, savage blows to end the struggle, to silence the shouting, to finish the job you were paid to do. Then, silence. A profound, ringing silence broken only by your own harsh, ragged breathing. The room is a wreck. A chair is overturned. The bed curtains are torn. The metallic, cloying smell of blood fills the air. This is going to be a nightmare to clean up. Really unprofessional. You stand there for a second, the bloody dagger heavy in your hand, looking at the mess you've made. The adrenaline begins to fade, leaving behind a nauseous dread and the searing pain in your arm. Your brief moment of stillness is shattered by the sound you've been dreading. Heavy running footsteps and shouts from the corridor. The entire household is awake. A bell begins to clang frantically somewhere in the keep. This is the hue and cry being raised. A medieval alarm system where everyone in earshot was legally obligated to drop everything and pursue a criminal. Historians still argue whether individuals who committed such violent acts in the medieval period were naturally psychopathic, cold-blooded killers, or if they were ordinary people brutalized by warfare and a harsh society, capable of compartmentalizing extreme violence as just another dirty job. Right now, you don't feel like a cold-blooded killer. You feel like a fool who has just kicked a hornet's nest. It seems your surprise party has been discovered. Time to make an exit before they cut the cake, which in this case is probably your head. The kill is complete. The absolute chaos has just begun. The splintering crash of an axe against the bedchamber door jolts you from your post-mortem stupor. There is no time for contemplation, no moment to savor victory or wallow in regret. There is only the frantic, primal urge to escape. Your brilliant escape plan, which consisted mostly of walk out quietly, now seems to be run very fast and try not to get stabbed. It lacks a certain nuance. You bolt, not back the way you came, but deeper into the manor's private wing, seeking any exit that isn't filled with angry, armed men. You crash through a set of adjoining doors into what must be the ladies' chambers, a swirl of silks and perfumes. A woman screams, pulling a sheet up to her chin. You are a terrifying apparition, a blood-spattered phantom in the night. You don't pause. You are pure momentum, a desperate force of nature seeking only an exit. You find what you're looking for, a large window at the far end of the room, overlooking the inner courtyard. You throw open the shutters. It's a 2-story drop. Below, the courtyard is already a scene of chaos, torches flaring to life as guards and servants pour out of the keep's main entrance. There's no time to be delicate. You see a heavy tapestry depicting some long-dead ancestor's glorious boar hunt hanging beside the window. You slice it from its rod with your dagger, loop it over the sill, and begin your clumsy, frantic descent. The wool is rough against your hands, the pain in your wounded arm flaring with every movement. Halfway down, the ancient fabric, never intended to hold a man's weight, rips with a sickening, tearing sound. You fall the last 10 feet, landing in a jarring, painful heap on the stone paving of the courtyard. You've traded one trap for another. You're exposed, and the guards have seen you. A man shouts, pointing in your direction. This is where your foresight, meager as it was, pays off. You fumble for the pouch at your belt, pulling out the handful of iron caltrops. With a wild swing of your arm, you scatter them across the flagstones between you and the advancing guards. The first few men, running hard, don't see them in the flickering torchlight. Their cries of pain as the iron spikes pierce their boots and feet buy you precious seconds. You scramble to your feet and sprint for the outer wall. An arrow whistles past your ear, thudding into the grass of the courtyard. They are actively trying to kill you now. The climb up the wall is a desperate, adrenaline-fueled scramble. You don't have the luxury of searching for handholds. You claw your way up, ignoring the scrapes and bruises, the raw agony in your wounded arm. You throw yourself over the top, tumbling down into the dark, misty alleyway outside the manor. For a glorious second, you think you've made it. But the ringing of the manor's alarm bell has been joined by others across the city. Shouts echo from neighboring streets. The hue and cry is in full effect now. Historians still argue whether the hue and cry was an effective medieval policing tool for capturing criminals, or more of a chaotic, disorganized mob that was just as likely to capture the wrong person or allow the real culprit to slip away in the confusion. Tonight, it feels plenty organized, and it's all directed at you. The whole city is awake and looking for you. It's nice to be popular. You know the city gates will be sealed shut until morning. This is a mainstream and non-negotiable part of any medieval city security. Trapping you inside the walls was the first thing the Watch would have done. You can't run from the city. You must disappear within it. You need a place to hide, to tend to your bleeding arm, to simply breathe. You dart down a series of ever smaller, fouler-smelling alleys, the sounds of pursuit seeming to come from every direction. You spot a potential, if utterly disgusting, escape route. The dark, stained outlet of a garderobe chute, emptying from a wealthy house directly into a ditch that feeds towards the river. A soft, if fragrant, landing. It's a desperate choice, but desperation is all you have left. Without a second thought, you slide into the filthy ditch, the cold, stinking ooze soaking through your clothes. You half wade, half crawl along the channel, using the cover of darkness and the overwhelming stench to mask your trail. You finally find a small, forgotten culvert where the ditch passes under a street, and you pull yourself inside. It's a cramped, foul-smelling hole, water dripping from the stones above. But it's dark, and it's out of sight. You sit there, back pressed against the slimy stones, your heart pounding a frantic rhythm against your ribs. You are wounded, trapped, and being hunted by an entire city. Your graceful getaway has ended with you hiding in what is essentially a sewer. The mission is complete, but your life has never been in more immediate or more squalid peril. You crouch in the dripping, stinking darkness of the culvert, the foul water chilling you to the bone. The sounds of the hue and cry, the shouting and the ringing bells are still a chaotic symphony in the distance. But down here, the world has shrunk to the throbbing pain in your arm and the frantic beating of your own heart. You tear a strip from the bottom of your tunic and clumsily bind the gash, hissing as the rough fabric grinds against the wound. The adrenaline that fueled your violent escape has now drained away, leaving a cold, clear dread in its wake. As the immediate fear of capture recedes by a fraction, a new, more insidious paranoia begins to creep in. You think of your patron, the calm, wealthy man in his velvet doublet. The job is done. Lord Valerius is dead. And in that moment of realization, a horrifying certainty dawns. Your employer now has every reason in the world to want you dead. You are a loose end, a bloody, inconvenient walking liability. While you live, you are the sole link between him and the murder of a powerful guildmaster. You possess the knowledge that could ruin him, get him exiled, or even executed. It doesn't matter that no one would believe your word against his. The mere accusation, the faintest hint of a scandal, could be disastrous for a man of his standing. Killing you is not a matter of if, but when. It's the final, neat closing of the account. This grim logic is a historical fact of such dark dealings. The same desperation and lack of connections that made you the perfect tool for the job also make you the perfect victim for the cleanup. You have no powerful family to avenge you, no guild to demand justice. You are disposable. Your severance package, you realize with a cold knot in your stomach, is almost certainly a dagger in the back. The hue and cry is a clumsy public affair, a net full of holes. The City Watch is looking for a killer, yes, but they don't know your face or your name. Your patron, however, does, or at least his intermediary does, the big rock-faced man from the tavern. He is not looking for a generic culprit. He is looking specifically for you. While the city guard thrashes about, he and a few other choice men will be conducting a second, far more precise and deadly hunt. They know your description, your habits, where you were staying. They are not trying to capture you for trial. They are trying to erase you. Now hiring. Person to hunt me down. Experience preferred, but willing to train the right homicidal maniac. Suddenly, a sound cuts through the distant din. A single, clear bell from the direction of your target's manor. It's not the frantic, clanging alarm bell, but a different tone. A deep, solitary chime that rings out 3 times and then falls silent. It could mean anything, or it could mean everything. Perhaps it's a quirky, prearranged signal, a discreet message to the patron's men across the city. The deed is done. The primary target is eliminated. The secondary target, you, is now active. Your blood runs even colder than the sewer water you're sitting in. You are now trapped between 2 fires. The law wants to hang you as a murderer. Your former employer wants to bury you as an inconvenience. There is no safe harbor, no one to turn to. You can't go to the watch for protection. You can't appeal to your patron for mercy. The half of the broken coin you carry, meant to be your ticket to a new life, now feels like a death warrant. It's the one piece of evidence that physically ties you to the conspiracy. This little piece of silver was supposed to be worth a fortune. Now its main value is as a sharp object to throw at someone just before you die. Was this always the plan? Was the promise of a final payment always a lie? Historians still argue whether the betrayal of hired agents was a standard, almost universally expected operating procedure in medieval conspiracies, a cold and logical final step, or if it was a more variable practice dependent on the patron's personal sense of honor among thieves, or the agent's perceived future usefulness. Looking back at the patron's calm, clean-handed demeanor, you suspect he is not the type to be troubled by honor among thieves. He is the type to own the thieves, and to dispose of them when they are no longer useful. The pain in your arm is a dull, insistent throb, a reminder of the night's bloody work. But the fear that now grips you is sharper than any blade. It's the fear of the known enemy, the one who hired you, the one who knows your face. You are no longer just a killer on the run. You are a loose thread in a rich man's tapestry, and he has just handed his tailor a very sharp pair of scissors. The hunt has changed, and you have just become the hunted. Dawn breaks gray and miserable, filtering through the grime of the city and into your wretched hiding place. The hue and cry has faded from a frantic roar into a persistent, suspicious hum. Guards still patrol the streets, but the initial city-wide panic has subsided. It's time to move. You slip from the culvert, every muscle screaming in protest, the wound in your arm a hot, angry throb. You are coated in a layer of filth that makes you retch, a stench that announces your presence long before you are seen. This is the beginning of your new life as a fugitive, and you quickly discover that life on the run in a medieval city sucks. The biggest, most terrifying reality you now face is the utter lack of anonymity. This isn't a sprawling modern metropolis where you can melt into a crowd of millions. This is a walled city of tight-knit communities. Every neighborhood, every street has its own rhythm, its own familiar faces. Strangers are noticed, questioned, and remembered. As a historical fact, medieval society was intensely parochial. A person's accent, the cut of their clothes, or simply their unfamiliar face could immediately mark them as an outsider and draw hostile suspicion. You are a ghost, but one that everyone can see. Your first priority is your appearance. Your clothes are ruined, stained with blood, and the filth of your escape route. You are a walking piece of evidence. Huddled in the shadow of an empty market stall, you watch a nearby tenement, waiting for an opportunity. After what feels like an eternity, a woman emerges to hang laundry on a line strung across the alley. You wait until she's gone, then move quickly, pulling a rough-spun, dun-colored tunic and a pair of worn breeches from the line. They are coarse and probably lice-ridden, but they are clean of blood. You change in the shadows, bundling your old clothes and sinking them in a rain barrel. Your new look is desperate plague victim. It's very fashionable this season and great for encouraging social distancing. Next, shelter. Your old room is out of the question. It was the first place either the watch or your patrons' men would have checked. You need a place to lie low, to rest, to let your wound heal, but you can't simply rent another room. An innkeeper would want your name and your business, and your face is now the most dangerous currency you own. You are relegated to the city's forgotten spaces. You find a collapsed section of an old storehouse, or perhaps a long-abandoned goat shed at the edge of the tannery district. This abandoned goat shed has a lot of rustic charm, and drafts. Mostly drafts? This becomes your new home. A damp, cold space with no door and the constant company of rats. Hunger quickly becomes a gnawing obsession. The coins in your purse are almost useless. Spending them draws attention. You resort to stealing. An apple from a cart when the merchant is distracted, a loaf of bread left cooling on a windowsill. Every petty theft is a gamble, a risk of being caught and having your face scrutinized too closely. The world has shrunk to a series of calculated risks for the most basic necessities. The city itself becomes a chessboard of threats. You learn the patrol routes of the city watch, their movements as predictable as the sun. But it's your patrons' men you truly fear. They are smarter, more motivated. You catch a glimpse of the big man from the tavern, no longer looking like a simple heavy, but like a predator, his eyes scanning every face in a crowd. You duck into an alley, your heart hammering, until he passes. The paranoia is constant, but it's what's keeping you alive. A few days into your new existence, you see it. A crier nailing a fresh proclamation to a post in the square. From your hiding spot, you can see the crude woodcut image. It's a generic bearded man, but the description is specific enough. A reward is offered for information leading to the capture of the vile murderer of the noble Lord Valerius. It's nice to know your work is valued. You wonder briefly if you can collect the reward on yourself. Now, every hungry citizen, every cut purse, every person you bump into is a potential informant, eager to trade your life for a handful of silver. You even consider the desperate option of sanctuary. You know that certain major churches can offer a fugitive legal protection from arrest for a period of time. This quirky, fringe legal status could give you a place to rest and heal, but claiming sanctuary is a public act. You'd be trapped within the church grounds, a prisoner of your own safety, and your enemies would simply wait outside. It's a short-term solution that guarantees a long-term problem. The city, which you once navigated with a sellsword's easy confidence, has become a cage. Historians still argue whether the medieval system of watchmen and collective responsibility was more effective at maintaining social order and controlling its own populace than at capturing skilled, determined fugitives who knew how to exploit its limitations. Right now, it feels brutally effective. You are trapped, wounded, and being hunted from two different directions. Surviving the kill was one thing. Surviving the aftermath is proving to be a far more grueling and miserable ordeal. Huddled in the back of the abandoned goat shed, the world contracts to the fiery, throbbing agony in your arm. The clean slice you received during the fight has become a swollen, angry red territory, weeping a foul-smelling fluid. You are a man who deals in death, an expert in causing wounds, but you have a terrifyingly juvenile understanding of how to heal them. In your desperate fugitive state, you come to a grim realization. You survived the guards, the dogs, and the city watch, but it's sickness, injury, and the simple, grinding filth of your existence that will most likely kill you. Your primary enemy is now the wound itself. My arm has decided to take up a new hobby, glowing red and throbbing with the beat of a death metal drum solo. Before germ theory and modern medicine, even a small cut could be a death sentence. This is a historical fact. Infection was a mysterious, almost malevolent force, and without antiseptics or antibiotics, the body was left to fight a lonely, often losing battle against sepsis and gangrene. You try to clean the gash with brackish water from a rain barrel, which probably only introduces new and exciting forms of bacteria. You bind it again with another stolen strip of cloth, but you know it's not enough. You remember seeing apothecaries use cobwebs or moldy bread on wounds. Lacking other options, you scrape some dusty cobwebs from a corner and press them into the cut, hoping the folk wisdom holds true. Your medical plan involves wishful thinking and a poultice that smells suspiciously like compost. I'm optimistic. You might even recall seeing a wound man diagram in a barber surgeon's shop once. That quirky, gruesome illustration of a man afflicted with every possible injury from a sword, slash to a spear thrust. You feel like you're becoming a living, breathing version of that unfortunate figure, a walking catalog of untreated misery. The constant grinding pain is a drain on your will, but the fever that begins to set in is worse. It starts with a deep, unshakable chill that makes your teeth chatter, even in the stuffy confines of the shed. Then comes the burning heat, your skin becoming slick with a greasy, foul-smelling sweat. Your thoughts grow muddy, drifting in and out of delirious fantasies and paranoid nightmares. The world outside your hiding spot becomes a blurry, threatening haze. Distinguishing between the sound of a real search party and a fever-induced hallucination becomes nearly impossible. And then there are the other ailments that come with a life of filth and desperation. The food you manage to steal is often half-rotten. The water you drink from ditches is teeming with invisible poisons. Your stomach cramps, and you're soon afflicted with the flux, dysentery. It's a debilitating, dehydrating sickness that leaves you weak, miserable, and even less capable of moving, let alone escaping. The flux is a terrible name for a disease. It sounds far too energetic for how it actually makes you feel. Between the fever and the dysentery, your body is systematically shutting down. The strong, capable assassin who scaled a castle wall is gone, replaced by a trembling, feverish wretch. The psychological toll of this physical decay is immense. The constant pain frays your nerves, making you jumpy and irritable. The fever clouds your judgment, blurring the line between caution and crippling paranoia. Historians still argue whether people in the pre-modern era had a higher physiological tolerance for pain due to a life of constant hardship, or if they simply lacked the vocabulary and conceptual framework to articulate their suffering in the way modern people do. You don't feel like you have a high tolerance for pain. You just feel it, an all-consuming fire that is slowly burning away your ability to think, to plan, to hope. You can't seek help. To show your face at an infirmary or to a physician would be to put a noose around your own neck. You are your own doctor, and you are a terrible one. Your formidable survival skills, your ability to move silently and fight ruthlessly, are useless against the invisible enemies now swarming in your bloodstream. Your patron doesn't need to send his men to stab you in the back. He just needs to wait. Your own body has become your executioner. This is the ultimate sucky reality of your profession. You don't die in a blaze of glory, in a legendary duel with a king's champion. You don't die from a well-aimed crossbow bolt during a daring escape. You die, most likely, alone in a pile of stinking straw, shivering with a fever you can't break. Your life seeping away from an infected cut you got while wrestling with a terrified merchant. It is a pathetic, undignified, and agonizingly slow end, a final, grim testament to the fact that in this era, the smallest of wounds can be more deadly than the sharpest of swords. The fire in your arm is now matched by a different kind of fire in your mind. The physical misery of your infected wound, the fever, and the filth have become the forge for a new, more terrifying affliction. The crushing weight of paranoia. Isolated in your wretched shed, your world has shrunk to a bubble of pain and fear. The constant stress, the lack of human contact, and the ever-present threat of discovery begin to erode your sanity, chipping away at the hard shell of the killer you thought you were. revealing the terrified, breaking man beneath. Solitude is a powerful poison. Days spent without speaking a single word to another human being start to unravel you. The silence is broken only by your own fevered muttering, the sound of your own voice startling you in the quiet. You start to have conversations with the rats that share your squalid home. My only regular conversations are with a particularly judgmental-looking spider and the ghost of the man I murdered. My social circle is a bit limited. The line between your inner monologue and the words you whisper aloud blurs and then vanishes completely. The fever from your wound fans the flames of your paranoia into a raging inferno. Every creak of the shed's rotting timbers is the sound of an approaching footstep. Every gust of wind rattling the loose boards is the whisper of one of your hunters. The shadows in the corners of your vision writhe and twist, taking on familiar shapes. You see the face of the bodyguard you killed, his eyes wide with surprise. You see your patron, his thin, cruel smile promising your doom. These are hallucinations, you tell yourself, tricks of the fever and the bad light. But the fear they bring is sickeningly real. This leads to a peculiar and terrifying form of torment. You begin to believe you are being haunted. This quirky, though deeply held folk belief was common in your time. The ghost, or revenant, of a person who died violently was thought to linger, unable to rest, sometimes actively seeking vengeance on their killer. You start to see Lord Valerius, not as a memory, but as a silent, watching presence at the edge of your vision. You'll be gnawing on a stolen, stale crust of bread and suddenly feel a cold spot in the room, and you'll look up to see his disapproving specter standing there, a silent accusation. It's hard to be stealthy when you're arguing with a hallucination about whether you should have used a different dagger. Your understanding of what's happening to you is framed by the beliefs of your age. You don't think in terms of psychological trauma or stress-induced psychosis. You fear you are going mad in the medieval sense of the word. You worry that your sins have invited a demon to torment your soul, or that your victim's spirit has genuinely latched onto you as a curse. This mainstream historical understanding of mental illness as a spiritual or supernatural affliction makes your decline feel not like a sickness, but like a damnation. This mental breakdown makes you a danger to yourself. One afternoon, convinced you see your patron's men closing in, you burst from your hiding place, dagger drawn, ready to fight. But the alley is empty, save for a stray dog and an old woman who screams and scuttles away at the sight of you. You've drawn attention, precious attention you cannot afford, all to fight enemies that existed only in your fevered mind. You retreat back into your hovel, your heart pounding with a new kind of terror, the fear of your own unraveling mind. On the bright side, the constant terror and feverish hallucinations really take your mind off the agonizing pain in your arm. You are not the first person in your line of work to crack under the strain. Killing is a grim business, and the life of a fugitive is one of unrelenting pressure. Historians still argue whether medieval soldiers, mercenaries, and others in violent professions developed forms of post-traumatic stress similar to what modern soldiers experience, and how they might have coped in a society that had no framework for understanding such psychological injuries, beyond concepts of cowardice or spiritual failing. You have no way to cope. There is no one to talk to, no way to process the horror of what you've done and the terror of what's to come. Your existence becomes a living nightmare. You are a starving, wounded animal, trapped in a cage of your own making, haunted by phantoms both real and imagined. The assassin, the cool, capable predator who infiltrated a fortified manor, is well and truly dead. Not from a sword or a dagger, but from loneliness, fear, and a simple, festering wound. All that's left is a paranoid, feverish man on the verge of complete collapse, waiting for the end, no longer certain if the footsteps he hears outside are the city watch, his betrayer's men, or just the rustling of the wind in his own shattered mind. In the cold, gray light of another dawn, your fever breaks. It doesn't flee in a rush of healing energy, but rather recedes like a foul tide, leaving behind a shore of wreckage. You are left shivering, drenched in a clammy sweat, and astonishingly, painfully lucid. The phantom faces in the shadows are gone. The maddening whispers have ceased. For the first time in days, your thoughts are your own. And in this newfound clarity, a new kind of horror settles in, one far colder and heavier than the feverish paranoia. You begin to confront the grim reality of your legacy, or more accurately, the utter lack of one. There will be no statues for a hired killer. You think of your target, Lord Valerius. By now, his body has been prepared for burial. His funeral will be a grand affair, attended by every person of consequence in the city. The priest will chant solemn prayers for his soul. His family will weep into fine linen handkerchiefs, and his fellow guildmasters will give somber, hypocritical speeches about his importance to the community. His name will be carved into a grand stone tomb inside the main church. As a mainstream historical fact, the nobility and the wealthy merchant class of this era were obsessed with their legacy, commissioning histories, endowing chapels, and building magnificent tombs to ensure their name and deeds, real or imagined, would echo through eternity. Lord Valerius, for all his faults, will achieve a kind of immortality. He will be remembered. And you? What will be your legacy? You are the instrument of his fame. If you are caught, you will be dragged through the streets, reviled and spat upon. Your name, if you even give it, will be forgotten, replaced by the simple, damning label, the assassin. You will be a footnote in the story of Lord Valerius's tragic end. Your final moments will be a public spectacle of degradation, a warning to other lowborn scum with ambitions. Your head will likely end up on a spike on the city walls, a feast for crows. If you are not caught, if you simply succumb to the infection festering in your arm and die here in this filthy, forgotten shed, your legacy is even less. You will simply vanish. Your body, if found at all, will be unceremoniously dumped into a pauper's pit, a tangle of anonymous bones. No one will know who you were. No one will mourn. No songs will be sung of your deeds. No tales told, except perhaps a garbled story years from now about the time the guildmaster was murdered by some unknown phantom. You will have no tomb, no marker, no memory. My epitaph will read, "He was good at stabbing, bad at career planning." You might recall seeing one of those quirky, morbid cadaver tombs that were becoming fashionable among the very rich. These transy tombs featured 2 stone effigies of the deceased, one on top, showing them in their prime, clad in finery, and another below, depicting their decaying corpse, crawling with worms and rot, a stark memento mori. You reflect, with a humor as black as your infected blood, that your own legacy will get to skip the glamorous top part and go straight to the anonymous decay. In the stark silence of your hovel, you force yourself to confront the simple, ugly truth of what you are. Not a righteous avenger, not a shadowy agent of change, not even a soldier fighting a secret war. You are a murderer. You took a man's life, not for a cause, not for a creed, but for a bag of silver. Your crime, stripped of all its dramatic trappings, is no different from that of a common footpad who slits a traveler's throat for his purse. You just had a wealthier client. You've made a real impact on the local political scene, mostly by lowering the census count by 1. This realization is profoundly emptying. It scours away any lingering justifications, any scrap of self-aggrandizing pride you might have clung to. What would you have even done with the money? Bought a farm? Put on fine clothes and tried to mingle with respectable folk? Historians still argue whether a successful but anonymous assassin could ever truly reintegrate into society and use their blood money to achieve a higher status, or if the nature of their crime and their lowborn origins would forever mark them as outsiders, their paranoia and past always clinging to them like a shroud. Looking at your filthy rags and feeling the fire in your arm, the question seems laughably academic. The feverish hallucinations, the ghosts, the paranoia. In a way, they were a distraction. They were terrifying, but they filled the emptiness with noise and action. This cold, quiet lucidity is worse. It offers no monsters to fight, only the pathetic, grim reality of your own choices. You are a nobody, a hired knife, a piece of human refuse that will soon be swept away and forgotten. I'm not asking for a parade, but a small, tasteful plaque saying, "He efficiently removed a competitor" would have been nice. The weight of your own meaninglessness settles upon you, a burden far heavier than any fear of capture. Your moment of cold, philosophical despair is a luxury you can't afford for long. The pain in your arm, the gnawing in your stomach, and the simple need for water force you back into the dangerous world outside your hovel. As you move through the city's shadowed arteries, a new and unwelcome feeling begins to prickle at the back of your neck. The distinct, unnerving sensation of being watched. It's different from the casual suspicion of the townsfolk or the clumsy searching of the city watch. This is a focused, intelligent scrutiny. And then you see him. A figure across a small plaza, pretending to examine a merchant's wares. But his eyes are not on the goods. They are on you. You've never seen him before. He's not one of your patron's men, not the big man from the tavern, or any of his thuggish associates. He doesn't wear the livery of the city watch. He is dressed in nondescript, well-kept clothes, a dark teal tunic, practical leather boots, that allow him to blend in perfectly. He is lean, quiet, and moves with a predator's economy of motion. You duck into an alley, your heart suddenly hammering for a reason other than infection or hunger. You take a roundabout route through the labyrinthine streets, and when you risk a glance back, he is there again, a block behind you, as silent and persistent as your own shadow. You are being stalked. This is a terrifying new development. You realize with a jolt that you are not the only desperate person in this dangerous line of work. Suddenly, this town feels very crowded with people trying to kill me. It's getting hard to keep track of who I'm supposed to be hiding from on which day. Who is he? The most likely explanation is that Lord Valerius's family or guild, impatient with the city watch's progress, has hired their own agent to exact revenge. A private investigator and executioner, all in one. Or perhaps it's something even more complicated. The historical fact is that politics in this era were a tangled web of conspiracies. It's entirely possible that another faction, completely unrelated to your patron, also wanted Valerius dead and had hired their own killer. Now that you've done the job, this rival operative might see you as a loose end to be snipped, a complication to be removed from the board. Oh good, a professional, you think with a surge of black humor. I was getting tired of being hunted by amateurs. This should be much quicker and more painful. This man's presence changes the entire dynamic of your fugitive existence. Hiding from the city watch is about avoiding brute force and sheer numbers. Hiding from your patron's thugs is about outwitting bullies. But hiding from a fellow predator, someone who knows the tricks of the trade, is a different game entirely. He will look in the places the watch won't. He will anticipate your moves. He will see the subtle signs of your passage that others would miss. One evening, you see him leave a small, subtle mark, a quirky, chalk symbol on a wall near your general area. It's a piece of canting slang in visual form, a sign you recognize from your old sellsword days. It might be a mark used by a particular mercenary company from a foreign land, a kind of professional calling card that says, "I know you're here." It's a message and a threat. He's not just hunting you, he's communicating with you, telling you he's better at this game than you are. This encounter strips away any last vestige of self-importance you might have had. You were hired because you were a desperate, skilled nobody. But the world is full of desperate, skilled nobodies. You are not part of some exclusive club. Historians still argue whether organized guilds or brotherhoods of assassins ever truly existed outside of specific state-sponsored or religious groups like the Hashishin, or if the profession was almost exclusively the domain of independent contractors and desperate sellswords like yourself. Looking at the quiet professional now hunting you, You suspect the latter is true. It is a free and open market for murder, and competition is fierce. It seems another freelancer is trying to muscle in on my territory of being a miserable, hunted wretch. Your squalid goat shed no longer feels like a sanctuary, however pathetic. It feels like a trap. This new player knows you're in this district. How long until he narrows it down to this very spot? Your life, already a nightmare of pain, sickness, and paranoia, now has an added layer of professional menace. You have the city watch wanting to hang you, your former employer wanting to bury you, and a mysterious new colleague who wants to do a job you've already been paid for, with you as a potential bonus. You are forced to move, to abandon your relative shelter, and go back out into the open with a new shadow attached to you. The physical exhaustion, the fever, the gnawing hunger, all of it is now secondary to the cold, sharp terror of being hunted by someone who truly understands the work. He is the living embodiment of the fact that you are, and always were, utterly replaceable. The end, when it comes, is not a dramatic, rain-swept duel on a castle parapet. It comes in a filthy, dead-end alleyway behind a tannery, with the stench of curing hides thick in the air and a cold drizzle slicking the mud under your feet. Your flight is over. You are too sick, too wounded, and too exhausted to run anymore. The fever from your infected arm has you trembling, and the paranoia has given way to a strange, hollow resignation. Your short, violent career is about to conclude with a grim and unceremonious ending. You are cornered. Perhaps the professional rival who was stalking you finally tracked you to this miserable spot. He steps out from the shadows at the mouth of the alley, his movements calm and deliberate, a stark contrast to your own ragged state. But before he can make his move, two more figures appear behind him, your patron's thugs, led by the big, rock-faced man from the tavern. And just to complete the party, the sound of a watchman's whistle shrieks from the street, drawn by the confrontation. All my admirers are here at once. I should have booked a bigger venue for my grand finale. What follows is a moment of pure violent chaos. It's not a noble fight. It's a desperate, grunting brawl in the mud. The professional killer might be here for you, but he has no love for your patron's men. Your patron's men see the rival as a competitor. The city watch, when they arrive, will just see a pack of armed thugs and try to subdue everyone. It's a confusing melee of shifting allegiances and desperate violence. You, in your weakened state, are the least capable person in the fight. You draw your dagger, your movement slow and clumsy. You are a ghost at your own execution. Killed by a rival, betrayed by my boss, or trampled by the city watch. It's nice to have options for how your miserable life ends. You lunge, more out of instinct than any real plan, and someone's elbow catches you hard in the face. You stumble back, slipping in the mud. The professional engages your patron's man, their daggers ringing in the close confines of the alley. A watchman's spear jabs out, trying to keep the brawlers separated. Your end is almost an afterthought in the confusion. A stray blow, a wild stab meant for someone else, finds its mark. Or perhaps in your feverish state, you simply stumble at the wrong moment, impaling yourself on a guard's spear. There is a sharp, searing pain, a feeling of surprise more than anything else. You fall to your knees in the cold, stinking mud. The sounds of the fight seem to fade, replaced by a dull roaring in your ears. Your gaze turns upwards, to the sliver of gray, indifferent sky between the leaning rooftops. This is it then. This is the grand reward. Your body is just one more problem to be cleaned up. The historical life expectancy for men in your line of work, sellswords, bandits, hired killers, was brutally short. Few died in a warm bed. Most ended up like you, bleeding out in some forgotten corner. A quirky feature of the developing legal system of the time was the role of the coroner, or crowner, who would investigate deaths. But for an unknown transient killed in a street brawl, the inquest would be cursory. Your body would be briefly examined, your pockets turned out to find nothing but a jagged half of a silver coin, and the cause of death declared misadventure or slain by persons unknown. You become a line item in a court ledger, your violent life reduced to a piece of bureaucratic paperwork. There is no legacy. The patron will be relieved. The rival, if he survives, will move on to his next contract. The city watch will forget your face by morning. You are a stone dropped into a murky pond, the ripples vanishing almost instantly. Historians still argue whether the lives of such fringe individuals, though brutal and short, represented a form of desperate freedom from the rigid feudal system of obligation and servitude, or if they were simply a more violent and less certain form of servitude to chaos and the whims of powerful men. As your vision fades to black, you suspect it was only the latter. Well, at least I'll be easy to dispose of. I already smell the part. Your career as an assassin was nasty, brutish, and blessedly, finally short. Word count, 1,095. And so, the frantic, desperate flight of the medieval assassin comes to its quiet, inevitable close. The echoes of the brawl in that muddy alleyway begin to soften, the sharp glint of drawn steel fading from view. The weight of the paranoia, the cold reality of betrayal, and the agonizing pain of a body pushed far beyond its limits can all be released now, drifting away like smoke on a cold night's air. Let the grim, tense muscles in your own shoulders relax, and the shallow, anxious breathing of the fugitive slow into a deep and peaceful rhythm. Your journey through that harsh and unforgiving world is over. You are no longer huddled in a filthy shed or running for your life through rain-slicked streets. You are safe, you are warm, and you are far, far away from that brutal reality. Allow the story to become just that. A story, its sharp edges smoothed away by the gentle distance of time and sleep. Let the profound quiet of your room replace the noise of the hunt, and the soft comfort of your bed erase the memory of the cold, hard ground. The final chapter has been written. The book is closed. There are no more shadows to fear, no more enemies to watch for. There is only the stillness of the night and the promise of a deep and restorative rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.